Very funny.
Very well said, Rufai. Let's take another story still in Nigeria. The indigenous people of Biafra on Tuesday claimed to be in talks with the United Nations to hold a referendum for a sovereign state of Biafra. In a statement by the group's media and publicity secretary, Ima Powerful, the group is making efforts for the referendum any moment soon, adding that residents within the Biafra territory and those living beyond the boundaries of Biafra will be able to determine their own fate. The group expects the United Nations to supervise the referendum and are calling for freedom for all and not just for Biafrans alone. I mean, this is another, what do you call it, Brexit?
Yes.
How is it possible to have a sovereign state without any form of, partition? I mean, I would like to know, how does that work?
It's possible.
Okay.
You can have, these are called, there are different types of referendums. These ones are called independence referendums. And an independence referendum does not actually need the consent of the national government. What tends to happen is if there's some kind of separatist movement, and that separatist movement gets support maybe at an election, they can now use that momentum to demand a referendum, not even of the national, or in our case, the federal government, just of their own people.
Okay.
They put a question on the ballot and people answer the question and they vote. And the United Nations will not call a referendum. Every country has their sovereignty. The United Nations will supervise, they'll observe if they're told to, they'll monitor a referendum if they're asked to. The United Nations is also relevant if the referendum succeeds and maybe the national government doesn't want to apply, the results of the referendum. The United Nations can come in and recognize that country as an independent country to give that referendum credence. So, yeah.
So then what happens to the people that are not in support of the sovereign state of Biafra, that are in that territory as well? What happens?
I'm speaking hypothetically.
Yes.
The referendum might not even happen because, like I said, it usually happens on the back of a popular movement. There has to be some momentum. You can't just wake up and have a referendum. Like if there's an election, for example, and let's say, I don't know, a particular political party, a separatist party, wins all the states, then from there you can now use that momentum to call for a referendum. Right now that has not happened.
Yes.
So if at all the referendum does happen, if people vote no, then vote to be counted, then it's no, and they stay in Nigeria. But if there's an overwhelming yes or a majority yes, then they leave. If at all the federal government allows it. And the United Nations and the international community rally around the new states.
Well, they have claimed that it's going to be a peaceful process. I don't know how that's going to be, but I think that we can come back to continue on this discussion.
Let's take a short break. When we return, I will give you my views on the issue of the referendum. We'll take a short break now. When we return, the morning show will continue with What's Trending with OG. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. And still with us in the studio is OG Akpe with What's Trending. Well, before we went on break, we were talking about the request of the Indigenous Peoples of Biafra, through Emma Powerful, the secretary, asking for a referendum to be organized by the United Nations. Now, the subject we're dealing with, basically, is self-determination. And self-determination, is an internationally recognized right by various UN conventions. Whether you are talking about Kosovo, or you are talking about East Timor, or you are talking about Cameroon. And it is indeed true that the United Nations can supervise referendums. The right of a people to determine their own future, to determine their own sovereignty. Now, two examples. In February 1961, the UN supervised the referendum to determine whether Northern Cameroon or Southern Cameroon would join Nigeria or join Cameroon. And that referendum was conducted. At the end of the day, when the votes were tallied, people can vote yes or no. At the end of it, Northern Cameroon joined Nigeria. Southern Cameroon, led by Ndeli Anko, joined Cameroon, the French-speaking Cameroon. Now, this was the decision over the British-occupied part of Cameroon at the time. In 1999, it was East Timor. And it was the president of Indonesia at the time who approached the United Nations to allow the people of East Timor to decide whether they would like to have special autonomy within Indonesia or have their own independence. And of course, they rejected special autonomy within Indonesia. In 2002, East Timor became independent on its own. And then you have the example of Kosovo and all of that. But whatever happens, there is no way that the United Nations can do a referendum inside Nigeria over and above the head of an existing sovereign. That is the Nigerian government itself.
Yes.
Now, would there be a referendum in Biafra? And how will it pan out? I know that there are many agitators from the eastern part of the country who say Nigeria has been unjust to Igbos in the Nigerian Federation, that Igbos have been marginalized, because at the basis of questions of self-determination, it's always about citizenship, it's always about justice, it's always about equity. Would they be able to get enough votes? Well, my gut feeling is that, look, most Igbos will probably not want to leave Nigeria. I may be wrong. And speaking for myself, I'd rather have Nigeria as it is, as a diverse nation, you know, as this rainbow nation, multicultural. And I mean, a Nigeria without Igbos would not be the same Nigeria.
All right, but
and I hope that even if it is put to vote, that more Igbos would rather stay in Nigeria, because Igbos are already, you know, completely enmeshed in the Nigerian Federation. They are part of the fabric of this country. And I think that the ordinary Igbo man does not share the same sentiments with Emma Powerful.
Well, you never know. You never know.
They might have to put it to the vote.
That's
my own
But then there's also the outcry of the allegation of the Christian genocide, which is what they are using as the propaganda to try to have this sovereign Biafra state. What is your take on that, Rufai?
I mean, people always have a reason for doing things, but I think I'd like to agree with Dr. Abati. We are better together as a nation, but it is incumbent on us to also look at the fault lines of why these agitations and ask ourselves, have the nation been fair to the Igbos? And if we can answer that question, we should start to look inwards in terms of infrastructural development and the likes. Because all over the world, like Dr. Abati said, you know, you're going to have agitations. I think in Spain, they even had a separatist movement for the Basque region. The group was called Escordita Azacatasuna, ETA, pushing for the liberation of the Basque region. Even in Canada, as you think Canada is all peaceful, people in Quebec too have been pushing for nationhood, but they're always underlining issues. Despite the works Trudeau's father, Elliot Trudeau, did, Justin Trudeau's father, you know, to bring Canadians together. So there are underlying issues. I think what we should focus on really is the underlying issues. How we can, you know, help to show that we are a true federation, develop the East, make the East a heartland. Whatever is due to them, you know, we should give them and make them one part of this nation. Like you said, Igbos are too vested. I mean, if they leave, who are they going to leave Ladipo market for? That's a big question I want to ask.
Well, they'll create their own Ladipo market.
A lot of Igbos own properties. They are even intermarried here. Let's not deceive ourselves, but let's also look at the factors for those agitations. Because if you ask me, honestly, I would say to a large extent, those factors of agitation have not been addressed. It still looks like an unequal country. Some people are put down, some people are put on. I love my Igbo brothers. Kedu?
At the same time, Yorubas are also asking for Oduduwa Republic.
Yes.
So that's why those fault lines that Rufai referred to are important. We need to remake the nation.
Yes.
Do we really have a nation in which every part has a sense of belonging?
What you said, Rufai, reminded me of Scotland. There's a sense of disenfranchisement with Scotland, and their referendum, everybody was so convinced that Scotland would vote to leave the United Kingdom, and they didn't. So in spite of a lot of, you know, disenchantment that people have, I guess you're right. Many of us are creatures of habit.
Yeah.
And we're so intertwined as we are. Yeah.
But nothing is given.
It's not.
That's the point
it's really
I'm
not.
making.
Yeah.
It's in the example of
Scotland, yes.
All right. Well, let's take another.